The 1893 Chicago World Fair was an event of celebration for American ingenuity. It was the first time that the U.S. Mint had memorable coins minted. It was also the first time that the U.S. Postal Service sold printed postcards. Unfortunately, something quite a bit darker happened at the 1893 Chicago World Fair. A man by the name of Herman Webster Mudgett owned a hotel. And in this hotel, it's believed that up to 200 murders could have been committed. Only 27 have ever been proven, and this hotel is now historically known as the Murder Castle. Herman Webster Mudgett raises a question of morality, a question that has been thrown around by philosophers, scientists, and scholars alike. Are we born evil? The question is highly debated. Could someone like Adolf Hitler have been born evil? Someone just doesn't acquire a desire to cause the Holocaust. Norman Mailer wrote a very controversial book about Hitler's childhood, in which Hitler, at the age of 2, showed very little sympathy for the beating of a dog, and may have contributed to his brother's own death. We see also odd occurrences in family. Gary Gilmore was a murderer, but he had a brother who wasn't a murderer. So was it genetic? We don't know. Famously, Jeffrey Dahmer killed several people as a serial killer. He also had a brother who has now changed his name. Some have attributed Dahmer's behavior to his childhood, but he and his brother shared the same childhood. So that points to the fact that it could have been a little deeper. Perhaps a genetic defect. One genetic example was a study done at Johns Hopkins University on mice. They studied that mice lacking a certain gene would have random bouts of violence and violently rape other mice, regardless of sex. The gene that they lacked blocked the creation of nitric oxide within their bodies. Nitric oxide is a neurotransmitter, and at Johns Hopkins University, they concluded that nitric oxide was the social limiter. It basically tells us what's right and wrong in society, and without it, we go crazy. Despite there being several critics of the genetic theory behind serial killers, several scientists, even the critics, agree that most behavioral issues can be found in the genetics. An example of this was done at Yale University's Baby Lab on children younger than 24 months. The child would be shown a puppet show in which a rabbit would do a good deed for somebody, wearing a certain color of shirt. And then another puppet show would be done in which the rabbit would be wearing a different color of shirt, and this time would do something mean towards somebody, in which later the child would be shown the two rabbits, and the child would choose which rabbit was his favorite. 87% of the time they chose the color of the shirt of the rabbit that did the good deed. Critics of this say maybe they're choosing the favorite color of the child, but Yale University has done several studies on different colors to make sure that this confusion wouldn't happen. Unfortunately for the Baby Lab, they still have a bunch of work ahead of them in trying to prove that children aren't blank slates anymore, because that idea has been the norm since Aristotle. Even Sigmund Freud supported it. But Paul Bloom, the leader of the Baby Lab at Yale, recently released a book titled Just Babies: The Origin of Good and Evil on the subject. To understand murder, perhaps we need to understand murderers. Why is it that people kill? Only some of these reasons can be genetic. Perhaps someone is just naturally aggressive, which can be a genetic defect or something that is supported by parents. You could also be one of those people that doesn't cuss, that doesn't yell, holds in everything, and eventually they explode. Murderously. The insane can be a strong contender for somebody who becomes a murderer. The paranoid, people who are afraid of everything, and then there's the attention seeker, somebody who wants to see a movie made out of their exploits. Several of these can be genetic. Others are just fortified by parents, people who resent their parents, their lovers, the world. These are people that become murderers. So perhaps it's not just genes that are behind the anatomy of murder. So, what happened to Herman Webster Mudgett? Well, he's now more commonly known as H.H. Holmes, and he was arrested, but not for murder. He was arrested for tax evasion, upon which he actually admitted to several murders, and when police searched his famous murder castle, they found 27 bodies. They think. Because there was such a mix of decomposing bodies that trying to find different bodies was nearly indiscernible. Yes, humans have done some terrible things. Murders have been prevalent across the world, and humanity has been pivotal in a Holocaust, 2 world wars, and near nuclear destruction. They also created slavery. We live in a world where we can write an entire book called The Great Big Book of Horrible Things. A dark truth is that we are terrible, but we also have the chance of being extremely good. We must take up a moral defense against murder and evil, even if you were born that way. Remember, never stop asking questions.